Hi, this is Julie with Beadaholique, and today I'm going to show you a bead weaving technique, and that's going to be the circular brick stitch around a bead. And so you can see in this bracelet, here's a really good example of it. I've got two buttons, which I've essentially created using the circular brick stitch around an 8mm pearl, and these are size 11/0 Czech glass seed beads. And then here I've actually gone and embellished the circular brick stitch with just a decorative edge. And I'm going to show you in a second video how to do that edge, but for the first video, I really want to concentrate just on making the circular brick stitch around that pearl. So what you're going to need is you're going to need an 8mm round bead. You want it to be perfectly round. You could do a faceted bead, but it's going to have a different effect and it's going to cause your bead weaving to have a staggered appearance. You're going to need some seed beads. I'm using size 11/0 Czech glass. This is antique cream pearl, and then I also have another size 11/0, which is gold Supra metallic, and it's kind of fun because it's got a nice matte finish to it. You're going to need a size 12 beading needle. You're going to need some beading thread. I have NYMO size D, and you're going to need a pair of scissors, and that's all you're going to need to start with. So what we are going to want to do first is cut yourself off a length of thread. Make it about 4 feet long. And the amount you need is going to be based upon how many of those circular rounds you want. So if you know you're going to be doing quite a few of them, you're going to want a lot more thread. You can always add more thread later though by tying it off and adding a new thread. So I'm just going to thread my needle here. And I'm going to put one bead onto it, my big bead, which I'm going to be beading around. I'm going to pull that towards the other end, leaving a tail of approximately 7-8 inches. What you then want to do is tie a surgeon's knot right over the edge of your bead. So a refresher how to tie a surgeon's knot is you just do a simple over under, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take our thread, go over, under once, and then under a second time. And then you're going to want to pull that real tight. Okay, if you can see right here, we have the thread arcing across the bead. So now I want to do is I want to actually pull that so the knot is up by the hole. I want to take my needle with my thread on it. I want to go back through my bead, pull tight, and I actually just slipped that knot into the inside of the hole, which is what I want to do because now that knot is gone. And now I'm going to take my needle, go to the other end, the hole, push it through, pull it. Now I'm going to take my needle. This was the bridge. This was the thread that we already tied off. I'm going to put my needle under it, pull through, loop back around into that loop, and pull tight. So now you can see I have a bridge of thread all the way around on both sides of my bead, and I've positioned it so that they're lined up pretty evenly. You're going to be able to manipulate them a little bit, but you don't want those two threads to be next to each other. So now we're going to start our bead weaving. And to do that, I like to make it so I have as little thread to work with as possible to begin with, just in terms of the length. It makes it a little bit easier to do the bead weaving. So I'm going to pull it down so my tail is near my bead. So I'm going to make my stitching easier. And I'm going to pick up 2 size 11/0 beads onto my needle. Take the tip of my needle, put it under the archway, under that thread on one side, pull, position these so that they're flat, they're not stacked. And then take my needle and go up through that second bead and pull tight. So that is my first stitch. Now I'm going to take another size 11/0 of the same color. I'm going to go under that thread, pull through, and back through that bead. Pull tight. Sometimes I find it does help to actually hold this tail just as a way of positioning the bead. And I'm going to keep doing that all the way around my bead until I meet up over here on the other side. I've just completed my first row almost around the pearl, and I've got just one more bead to go, so I'm going to add that bead right now. As you can see, these are all lined up uniformly around the pearl. So add one more bead the same way you've added all the other ones. So I'm just going to go under the bridge, pull through, go up through that bead again, pull tight. Now I got a nice bridge between each of my beads, you can see, and I'm going to use that bridge to string my next row. However, right now I'm missing a bridge between that first bead I strung and the last one of the row. So I'm going to go down through the top of that first bead, pull, go under the bridge, pull through, and now back through that last bead I strung to create a nice solid row. So everything is nice and secure, and now I have a nice bridge I can follow between all the beads to start the next row. So for the next round of beads, we're going to go ahead and go to a different color, and I have this pretty pearl color, and we're going to pick up 2 beads, and we're going to take our needle and we're going to put it under the bridge, which we just created, pull it through. Your beads are going to want to stack like that, but you don't want that. You want them to be side by side. So just help them along a little bit. There we go. Pull tight. By doing that, you've created a bridge, which you're going to use in your next layer, in your next round. So now we're going to pick up just one bead, go through the next, go under the next arch, and back through. A couple quick tips here I want to show you that I'm doing. First off, if you can see, sometimes you have to make a decision if you're going to go ahead and bead again under the same bridgeway or the one next to it. Just do what looks right to you. You don't want your beads to have large gaps between them, so you're not going to necessarily do one bead per bridge. Sometimes you might have 2 beads on a bridgeway, sometimes you might have 1. You're just going to do what looks best so that you have a nice even layer, a nice even round. So then what you're going to do is you're going to pick up that bead, go under the bridge which looks most appropriate to you, which is closest, and then I want to show you I'm pulling my thread away from the bead. So I'm not pulling my thread in this direction, I'm pulling it, I'm right-handed, so I'm pulling it towards my right. And that's helping to get that bead to lay up nice and close to the previously strung beads. So let me show you that again. Here's a good example where I have to make a decision. Do I go through this bridgeway or do I go through this bridgeway? And I'm actually going to go ahead and choose the second one. But I am going to pull my thread towards the right so that that bead will then sit next to the previously done ones. You can see now it's laying up right against them. So keep beading until you end up again where you started, and then we'll go on to the next level. Now here's an interesting point, which happens a lot actually I find when I'm doing a circular brick stitch. You can tell that there's a little gap between the first bead I did in the second row and then the last bead I just strung, and it looks like it's maybe just big enough for another bead, but I don't think it's going to be. So let me show you what another bead would look like. So I've put that bead onto my needle. I'm going to go under that thread bridge, back through, and now I'm going to if I was actually going to bead this one, I would go back up through that bead and pull tight, but look what's happening. We're getting a little bit of almost like two colliding mountainsides. They're just pushing up against each other, and I don't like that. I want it to lay really flat. So I'm going to go ahead, remove this bead. I don't want that in there. And you'll find you're actually faced with that quite a bit. It'll look like it's just barely big enough and not quite, and you'll have to make a decision if you're going to go ahead and add that bead or not. And 99.9% of the time, if you're debating, I say don't add that bead. It'll look a lot better in the long run. So even though I have this large gap, I'm going to go ahead and put my needle through without a bead on it, through that first bead in the second row, and watch what's going to happen. Pull it through, and I'm going to pull tight, and look. For the most part, that gap just disappeared, and it's going to disappear even more when I go ahead. I go under that bridge, which is beneath those two beads, pull tight, and flip this guy around, go back up through that bead I just strung, and pull. And you can see that pretty much evened itself out. I still have a really nice circle shape, and I don't have those two beads coming to a point like this, which is what I really wanted to avoid. So I'm going to start my third row, and you're going to be doing as many rows as you really want for your pattern. So there's really no rhyme or reason. I mean, I could stop at this, it looks beautiful, or I could add another 10 rows. It's just really a matter of what is going to work with your design. I sign off is I do want to let you know if that gap that we just talked about before where we were deciding if we wanted to add another bead or not, if that gap's too large and then you try to just create that bridge of thread and you pull it, you could end up making your beadwork concave. You can make it kind of form into a circle, which is actually an effect which is quite nice, but if you're not wanting that effect, you are going to have to carefully judge if you do want to add that other bead or you just want to have a little bit of a gap and form that bridge over it. So it's something that you'll just kind of get a feel for, and as you're doing more of the bead weaving, it'll come naturally and you'll just be able to see whether you want to add that last bead or not. So just continue on adding a bead at a time, going row by row for as many rows as you want, and then when you get to the point where you're ready to end your bead weaving, you'll just tie off your thread and weave the tail back into the beadwork as we show you in another video by Beadaholique. And then speaking of other videos, if you want to stay tuned, I'm going to show you in a separate video how to do this decorative edge. So the interior part, the first 3 rows is just circular brick stitch, and then it's a really simple technique to just add the pretty little scalloped edge with the smaller 3mm pearls. So that is how you do the circular brick stitch around a round bead.